Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Todd Talk, a presentation of Oklahoma Baptist University's Department of Athletic Communications. Normally this time of year, we would be getting ready for Southern Nazarene in the regular season finale in football, but 2020 has other ideas, and today we still talk Bison gridiron play with head coach Chris Jensen. Coach, how are you, my friend?
Doing pretty good, hanging in there. Glad to have got to do a little bit of football through the fall. Would love to be out there playing games, but we got to practice a little bit.
You know, I've talked to a lot of coaches, both in this series and certainly away from OBU. You can coach forever, and you never have a game plan that tells you exactly how to handle the situation that you guys are all facing in athletics in days like today.
Well, the thankful thing for me was I had to rework my schedule for the fall 4 times, and I hit 4 times, and that was it. So I usually on my spreadsheet for coaches' information and stuff like that, I've got one for fall schedule. I've got fall schedule times 4 down there. So, but we made it. We made it through. We're getting close to the end of the semester. Thankful for the things that we were able to do.
You know, for the longest time, the Great American Conference held out hope that maybe in some form or fashion play could be taking place in the fall. How difficult was it when you finally got the word that, hey, we're not going to have a fall season?
You know, I think I'd prepared myself for that. For me personally, I'm just going to focus on what I can do today. I think it hurt the players a lot more than I realized it was going to. You know, obviously they put a lot into it, and we left them. The last time we actually saw them in person before they showed up in August was the week before spring break. And in that meeting, I told them that the team that had the most discipline away from campus through all this was going to be the most successful. And I think they took that to heart, because when they came back on campus, it looked like they'd prepared themselves for the football season. And, you know, for them to hear one day that it's on, it got pushed back, and then the next day it's pushed back some more, and then the next day it's canceled, and then what are we going to do from there? All those things were questions that, you know, I'm old enough to handle those and take it with a grain of salt and just keep moving forward, focus on things I can control. But for those young guys that had put the time in through the spring and the summer, and they were just ready to go out there and do what they love to do, it was extremely hard for them. And I think it's still hard for a lot of those guys. But as the fall went on, I think they took advantage of the opportunity. And I think we had a great I think we had great practice through the fall and experienced the same things that you normally experience in the spring when you go against each other. But I think our players handled that with a great deal of maturity. And, you know, we got to a point where it was getting pretty chippy on the practice field, and you know, tensions were getting a little high. I had a little discussion with them, and they flipped the switch. And, you know, from that point on, the rest of the practices were great, very, very competitive, but not as chippy, just because, you know, I think the common theme I'm hearing right now is how important the brotherhood is and how much they love each other. And for us to be able to get to that point through all this is a significant undertaking for the coaching staff, for sure. But I think they've done a phenomenal job. The coaching staff has done a phenomenal job, and the players have done a great job at focusing on the things they can control and get to this point where we didn't waste the fall. I mean, we got better through the fall. We're excited about the spring and what that may hold, and then obviously going into the fall of 2021.
Let's talk a little bit about fall camp. I guess it was kind of an extension of what you do in the spring. Were your workouts basically designed the same way, your practice and workout schedule very similar to what you would do after Christmas?
Well, we have different segments. We have a championship segment that we can still operate in, which is what you would normally do in the fall. And so we used part of that. The NCAA has allowed football programs at our level to break our championship season up. So we used part of that to start practicing a little bit earlier than we normally would. And you have a non-championship segment, which is usually your spring football segment. You're limited to 15 practices in like 32 days, I believe. I think it's a few more than 32, but you're limited to 15 practices in your non-championship segment. And so what we did is we did an off-season segment to start with where we were just focused on the weight room. When we went to the championship segment, we did a mix of both the weight room and practice. And we went helmets only. We didn't do any contact practice. And we did that for 2 or 3 weeks. And then, we were lifting 3 days a week and practicing 3 days a week. And then when we went to our non-championship segment, that's when we got into the spring ball type schedule where we started putting the pads on and took advantage of our limited contact days and our full contact days, and culminated in the fall game, what we call the fall game last Thursday, which, I can't say enough how impressed I was with the work that James did, and Brian and Tanner and Andrew, and then having you and Brooksy out there doing that. It was a great atmosphere, I thought, last Thursday, a great culmination to the fall and all the things that we've done. But I thought the production value was significant. I thought
Totally
it was a Division I totally agree. Production. Yeah,
I totally agree with you, Chris. And I thought the enthusiasm with the crowd and the players, you could tell that everybody, even if it was for one night, cling to a little bit of sense of normalcy. And I thought it was very well played. I thought there were a lot of surprises from the game, but I think you guys showed people that you have gotten a lot better from the last time we saw you against Southern Nazarene.
Right. There's a different look to our team, and physically a different look, and then with regards to maturity, there's a different look as well. I think we've got a lot of guys that have been there for a while, been there, done that, and they've grown and they've matured. They could have taken steps back through the difficulties that we've experienced in all forms and fashions in 2020, but I don't think they have. I think they've continued to move forward.
Chris Jensen, OBU head football coach, is our guest on this edition of Todd Talk. OBU, of course, just recently, last week, in fact, including fall drills with the fall game 2020. Chris, I want to talk a little bit about that because you had told me before the ball game, you said, hey, we've got a lot of familiar faces back, but we have some freshmen that you're really going to like, and they're going to make an impact tonight and going forward to this program. And I think the people that watched it or were there to see it saw some of those new faces that you're really excited about.
Yeah, and it's especially on defense, up front on the defensive line. And I'm not singling out one position group because we've got young guys in all position groups that we are very pleased with the fact that they've come in and have, gotten in stride with everybody else. But I think the one position group that really stands out for me is on the defensive line. And, we've had a number of defensive linemen choose to opt out, which is that's something that's going to happen in this. What that means by opting out is they choose not to participate in the practice part of it. They don't lose their scholarship. They still go to school, but they don't participate with the team. And that's all driven by fear or concern about the virus. And so, we have to move on without those guys through the fall and potentially through the spring. And so there's one position group that had a lot of guys that opt out, and that was on the defensive line. Well, the young guys, the freshmen that came in, they took advantage of that situation, and they proved that they're a force to be reckoned with, especially on our team. But I think as they grow and mature, especially since they'll have a full year before they're actually going to get into GAC competition, I think they're going to play a huge part in our continued success as a football program.
Chris, one of the things we've always talked about during the years that we've worked together during this transition from building the program through NAIA to now competing at the Division II level, it's not been a matter of talent. You've had talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball and at the skill positions. It's been a lack of depth. And I think we all saw, and you kind of just touched on that across the board, this program has so much better depth than they've ever had.
We have it, and the way we did the spring game the other day, it kind of gives you a true picture of whether or not you have depth. Because when we pit the offense versus the defense and have a point system like that, normally when you go into a spring game or a game atmosphere, and I had to remind the coaches this, I had to remind myself of this. Normally when you go into a game atmosphere, you have alternating possessions. And so your offense goes out there for a possession, and then they're on the bench while the defense is out there for a possession. It doesn't happen the other night. Once your offensive guys come off the field, you got to send somebody back out there. And so if you don't have depth to send somebody back out there, it shows itself in a format like we did last Thursday.
I want to talk about breaking down the two sides of the football. Let's start with defense. On the scoreboard, the defense actually won the fall game. Overall, were you pleased with the way they stood up to arguably the best offensive unit maybe in the Great American Conference?
I was very pleased. I set the point system myself, had reworked that, and the coaches were gracious enough to let me do that. And I asked for their input, but we did that. And, after the game, since the point discrepancy got to be a little bit larger than I thought it would be, I really questioned myself through that. And, you're always trying to evaluate, especially for next time, did we do it right? Did we not do it right? Do we need to tweak that a little bit? And there are a couple of things that I will tweak as far as the defensive point system. Not a whole lot, though. I thought, ultimately my take from that is, and it took a lot of time for me to get to this, but my take from that is we see in the evolution of football nowadays an offensive mindset. And I think that has come at the expense maybe to defense. And, a lot of people struggle to get their defenses up to speed to compete at a high level with the offenses in the way they do it. And a lot of people would make an argument that the rules have evolved to facilitate points. And, a lot of points being scored because that's what puts fans in the seats. That's what draws the dollars as far as advertising for the big level, the highest level, the Division I level football. And so when we did a structure like that, I think it comes at the expense of the defense. And so sometimes the defense doesn't look like they produce as much, but they're a lot of times asked to pick up where the offense is being aggressive. If the offense has an aggressive philosophy, a lot of times it puts the defense at a disadvantage, and they've got to come from behind and cover the offense. And if they don't, which is hard to do consistently, if they don't do that, then people raise questions about the defense. Well, in that structure where it's offense versus the defense, for me, I think it reminds us as coaches that there is a strategy to this game, because I think that the place we're at right now in football is the offense wants to score a touchdown every possession. Obviously, you want to do that, but that's not the reality of the game. The reality of the game is it's still a field position game. Where you start will give you a better chance of scoring each possession. And when you have an opportunity to get points, especially early, you need to take those opportunities. When the offense had a fourth down inside the 10 early in the game, that wasn't just a 3-point loss. That's a 5-point swing. They gave the defense 2 points, plus they failed to put 3 points on the board. They could have kept the defense from getting 2 points, added 3 points to their score, given the kickers a little bit of confidence at an easy kick. We've got all young kickers this year, giving them a little confidence at an easy kick right there early in the game might have paid off later in the game. And so, once you do that, once you make that decision to go for it on fourth down, you start chasing points. When you start chasing points in that structure, you can fall behind really fast. And, the first half shows that the game was pretty close, but the offense could have been on the upside. And if they use the traditional football strategy of field position, not giving the defense points, and the way they could do that is if you turn the ball over, turn it over inside the 20. Because the way we structured it, the defense gets 2 points for that for no score, but the offense gets 2 points for a ball being down inside the 20. It's a field possession game. A field position game. And so if you can prevent the defense from getting points by not making aggressive mistakes that don't go your way, you can win that thing. And so all that revealed itself after the fact.
OBU head coach Chris Jensen is our guest on this edition of Todd Talk. Chris, I thought one of the reasons, obviously, the defense excelled was they got better in doing something you haven't been able to do in the last few years. They created turnovers. They got 11 points off one key swing in the second half of that game.
Yeah, and that's another thing, too. Another tried and true truth about the game of football is turnovers kill you. Turnovers on the offensive side kill you, but generating turnovers is a significant advantage for your football team if the defense can do that, especially if they result in points. And so a scoop and score or an interception return for a touchdown, those things are priceless. And, that's just also evidence that you got to take care of the football on offense, and you got to try to get it on defense.
Let's assess the play of the offensive side of the football. I thought when the first team was out there, they were very, very efficient. You obviously know what you have behind center and Preston Hare. You also know that, and he didn't play, but Tyler Stever is going to be one of the best running backs in the conference. But I thought what we learned is the depth that you have at wide receiver. And I thought the improvement that Harris has made from his freshman season through the offseason was very significant when it was on display last Thursday night.
Yep, I'd agree 100%. And that's obviously the first string offense in the first series of the first quarter, first series of the second quarter went right down the field and scored. And then at times we stalled out. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think one of our deepest positions is wide receivers. And I think they all want to be good. And because of that, they work their tail off on a daily basis, not only in practice but in the weight room. I've never been around such a large group of guys that just prove by their actions that they want to be good. They want to be good on the football field, and they work hard off the field to be good on the field. And I agree. A wide receiver is one of our deepest positions. There are a lot of guys there. Keelan is one of those guys that has really worked hard. Obviously, Josh Cornell is the leader of that group, and he wants the ball in his hands, and he believes he's going to make every play. But the thing that I was most impressed with the wide receiver group, not just the catches they made, but how good they've been blocking on the perimeter. And it showed itself the other night. And Coach Eaton's done a phenomenal job with those guys, getting them to a point where they know that they're not just there to make the circus-style catches, which they can definitely do, but the game's bigger than that. And so if they're called to block, they block. If they're called to catch a ball, they catch the ball. And, if the next guy needs to come in, they just leave the field and let the next guy come in. Selfless group that really works hard.
Chris Jensen, OBU head football coach, is our guest. Chris, I know that in talking to you before the ball game, one of the areas that you wanted to really look at was the depth at quarterback. We all know who the man is. It's Preston Hare. But you need a backup, and you haven't always had that since Preston's been on campus. Knock on wood, we've been very, very fortunate. How did you assess the play of Trent Green and Drew Trent?
I think they both did a good job. Obviously we can't measure them based on what Preston does on the football field.
Right.
Preston, not only is he so accurate with the football and throwing the ball, but he has worked so hard in the weight room. That's another guy that's worked hard in the weight room to be strong on the field, and it translates to the field that he can make plays. And he's when we put the white jersey on him, it's to protect him, but it limits him because he can't do what he's the best at, making something happen when everything breaks down, just because we're going to get a quick whistle on him and not take him to the ground. And so, he's so accurate with the ball, and he's so strong, and the experience he has right now, we can't lose sight that those guys don't have a lot of those things, but especially the experience part, and get discouraged. Those guys have made a tremendous amount of progress through this fall football that we've been able to do, made a tremendous amount of progress, and they also have another 9 months to get their body in condition to go out there and at least be a serviceable backup. They've already made a lot of progress in that, but both of those guys can get a lot stronger. Both of those guys can benefit from experience with reps in the spring. And both of those guys, we're not going to be asking them to start a game in September of 2021. We're probably going to be asking them to start a game in September 2022. So they have a lot of time to develop. And so with the progress they've made and the kind of guys those guys are, and all the quarterbacks in that group, we're going to find somebody that won't be Preston when they first start, but somebody that we can put the ball in their hands and trust them to move our offense.
I know nothing's really official yet as to what you're going to do in the spring. There's been several different options kicked around. I talked to you about one of those, and that was playing the 5 other Oklahoma schools in the Great American Conference in the spring. That was something that you really were not for, but you have some other plans to get your guys some live reps in the spring against people other than yourselves.
Right. And I don't know. We'll probably make an announcement about that, an official announcement through Sports Information. And so, yes, we do have – right now we have 2 games that are scheduled, scrimmage or games we haven't nailed down exactly what the competition is going to look like. We have 2 scheduled, one more in the works. Really, we would like to have 2 home games, 2 road games, and possibly a 5th if we can make some money. And so the way you make money is you go play up. You go play a Division I FCS program. And I've talked to a coach about doing something like that. And so those are the possibilities. Want to get our guys a chance to compete against somebody else, and they're excited about that opportunity. But I thought this was a great time to go compete outside our conference. And because of the structure of our conference, 12 teams in our conference, we have 11 games, so we play all conference teams every year.
Yep.
And so a chance to go compete against other programs was an opportunity I didn't want to pass up on. And so I think it'll be good for our program. Been talking to some MIAA programs and Lone Star programs. And so that's pretty much what we're focusing on.
Chris, in summation, you've always been, even when things weren't going your way and you were in the early stages of building this program, you've always been a glass half full, not half empty type guy. So I guess having said that, you had a really good team that you would have put on the field in 2020. Has this allowed you to maybe even be a much better team the next time you actually do return to Great American Conference play?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to say yes to that question. We did recognize some guys that the other night. We recognized 6 of our players the other night that made the decision, and it was a difficult decision for them, for every single one of those guys, because with all of those guys, I talked to them. The reality is that everybody plays their last down of football at some point. Some guys get to choose when the last down is. Some guys don't get to choose when that last down is because of injury or whatever happens. These guys are caught in the middle. They could play football again, but it would come at some cost to them. They have job opportunities out there. They're graduating. Life is, there's life on the other side of their college experience, and, they're ready to get to that. And so these 6 guys have had to make that difficult decision to lay football down and move on with their life. And we would love to have those guys as part of the team. And so even though I'm encouraged by the progress that we made and the potential we have for 2021, we mourn the fact that those guys aren't going to be with us.
You bring up an interesting point, because I made this comment on the broadcast the other night. Knowing you the way that I do, yes, you want these kids to succeed individually and as a team on the gridiron. But I bet Chris Jensen feels like he hasn't done his job right as the head coach at Oklahoma Baptist University if you don't help these young people become better men and prepare for life after football.
That's exactly true. We're doing a lot of program evaluations. I've been talking to coaches and coordinators are talking to players. I've been talking to players, just getting an evaluation of the program. And, one of the questions we ask them is, what does our coaching staff do well? And to a man, all of them talk about how we care about the players off the field as much as we do on the field. And, I've been asked too in those evaluations, what do I think is the core value of this football program? Well, we've got our core values. We've got 6 core values that are printed and at the end of our hallway in our locker room. But, the coach said, hey, besides that, what's your core value for this program? And to me, it's developing those guys, to see them get from point A to point B, and to be, hopefully by the time they leave our program, they're ready to attack life and be very successful in everything they do. And that's what I know. If I can teach them to do that, they're going to help us on the football field, but they're also going to help themselves with their families, in their marriage, with their kids, in the workforce, in everything that they do. They're going to be successful, and that's what I want to see.
Last question for you. COVID's messed everything up. It's changed schedules. It's changed the way you approach things. Has it changed the way you guys have had to recruit and be in contact with prospective student athletes this fall?
It's put a little more work on Coach Milo's plate as a recruiting coordinator. Obviously we have to be flexible because we like to get out in the state of Oklahoma and even into North Texas every week. But there have been a lot of games that have been canceled or postponed. And so you got to be flexible, be willing to go where you can and stay away from where you can't. And then for Coach Milo, he's on the phone constantly throughout the week, communicating with athletic directors, finding out if there are any protocols or things that we need to follow, making sure that it's okay that our coaches are actually at the game, and what the procedure is for them when they get there. So it's put a lot more work into it. The recruiting's still the same, maintaining communication. One of the things we've seen though is I think you see a high school senior in 2020 right now, in fall of 20, is a lot more anxious to sign on the dotted line than they ever have been before, because they don't know what the future holds. And I think their philosophy is a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. And so if they can get an offer nowadays, and in the fall of 20, which isn't normal for our level, because a lot of times guys are waiting to see all the opportunities they're going to have. A lot of guys hold out for D1. Well, right now, if they get a good D2 offer, they're ready to sign. And so it's just kind of an indication of where we are and the anxiety, the level of anxiety there is in all aspects of our world nowadays. And so not knowing what the future holds, they're ready to have a little comfort in knowing that they've got a place somewhere. And so that's changed a little bit in the recruiting process.
Great stuff today. Chris, always good to visit with you and see you. Liked seeing you the other night, and we'll talk soon again.
Sounds good. Appreciate you, Todd.
Chris Jensen, head football coach at Oklahoma Baptist University, is our guest on this edition of Todd Talk. It is a presentation of Oklahoma Baptist University's Department of Athletic Communications. We'll talk soon. Until then, so long, everybody.